pernicious ideologies like critical race theory that are imposing a political agenda, sometimes things like critical race theory.
Critical race theory is spreading like a disease.
There is no course called CRT.
Critical race theory in education. It's a racist curriculum.
Critical race theory
Instead of critical race theory.
CRT.
She says CRT is not being taught.
This lie that CRT does not exist in education.
We believe in education, not indoctrination.
Does this make you feel like you're losing your mind? Kind of makes me feel like I'm losing my mind. So, great. Last week, the College Board, the nonprofit organization in charge of developing advanced placement or AP curricula and exams for high school students to take college-level classes around the country, released the finalized version of its newest AP course offering, AP African American Studies. Cool. The problem is that a draft of the curriculum leaked back in May of 2022, and this final one that was announced on February 1st, the first day of Black History Month, I'll mention, differs in significant ways from the draft leaked in May. Many are calling it a political move, citing to objections from across the far-right political spectrum, including Florida Governor and absolute toadstool Ron DeSantis, who banned the course in Florida schools. The College Board defended itself by saying that the changes were the result of a year of talking to 300 professors, and not at all because of political pressures. So this story got me reminiscing about my days as a student taking AP courses, but also thinking about this far-right obsession with critical race theory, okay? And I wanted to figure out why the hell they're so afraid of it. If there's anything we've learned from my alt-right TikTok reaction series, check out the one from last week after this, it's that the right's main motivation is fear. Fear of change, fear of a tyrannical government, fear of losing their place in the white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy hierarchy that they and their ancestors have always benefited from, and fear is motivating this as well, I think. So to figure out what's so scary about it, let's just take a little dive into critical race theory, this big scary course that the College Board originally came up with, and now the watered down version that they settled upon, since they're apparently too scared to teach you the critical race theory themselves. Roll the intro. Thank you to Upside for sponsoring this portion of today's video. Upside is a handy little app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, eats at restaurants, so like everyone, okay? If you follow my other channels, you may know that my sweet, perfect angel baby English bulldog Moira recently completed doggy boot camp. We are so proud of her. She is so perfect. Now this boot camp happened every single weekday for 4 weeks, and I had to drive her across town and then go pick her up at the end of the day, every day. And after 3 homebound COVID years, that was a lot of driving for me. And I was pretty shocked at how quickly I was running through gas. Upside to the rescue, okay? With Upside, I can get cash back on every gallon of gas that I buy running my sweet, stubborn little angel to and from puppy school, which thank God, okay? The app is really easy to use. You just open it up, you find the nearest gas station with an offer on Upside, and you go to there and pay for gas as usual. Then you follow the easy instructions inside the app, and then you get cash back on your transaction directly in the app, which you can then cash out via PayPal, e-gift card, or direct deposit. That's it. Easy cash back. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back with Upside. With all the cash I saved at the pump, I can now pay for another round of doggy classes for Moira because it turns out English bulldogs are very stubborn. So to get started, you can download the free Upside app, then use my promo code Leeja and get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. Thanks, Upside. According to its website, College Board is a mission-driven, not-for-profit organization that connects students to college access and opportunity. Founded in 1900, College Board was created to expand access to higher education. Today, the membership association is made up of over 6,000 of the world's leading educational institutions and is dedicated to promoting excellence and equity in education. Each year, College Board helps more than 7 million students prepare for a successful transition to college through programs and services in college readiness and college success, including including the SAT, the Advanced Placement Program, and Big Future. The organization also serves the education community through research and advocacy on behalf of students, educators, and schools. So that's what their website says. However, criticism of the College Board and its exams goes back as far as 1922, which was demonstrated in a Harvard Alumni Bulletin article written by prep school teacher Morgan Barnes. Barnes took 10 exams undercover as a student, and then requested the graded booklets of his results back. After he did that, he attempted to confront some of the graders who had scored him, and he criticized the general incompetence of the grading, plus increased focus on exam preparation in the classrooms, and an admission process that relies too heavily on test scores. It was 1922. Okay? Since the late 1970s, students, educators, and consumer rights activists had voiced their disapproval of the College Board's monopoly over products like AP exams, SAT subject tests, and the CSS financial aid profile. God, do you remember those? They're tools that are required for admission into competitive colleges, and the College Board has a virtual monopoly on all of it. An organization called Fair Test also says that tests administered by the organization underestimate African American aptitude. The consumer rights organization Americans for Educational Testing Reform has accused the College Board of unethical practices like lobbying legislators and government officials, as well as refusing to acknowledge test taker rights, all while making excessive profits and awarding exorbitant compensation. 19 executives of the College Board made more than $300,000 per year, and the CEO, 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏, earns $1.3 million in 2009, including deferred compensation. All of this despite the fact that they're a non-profit. And in its own AP African American Studies course framework, which I've linked below, that was officially released on February 1st, the College Board says, AP is an unflinching encounter with evidence. AP courses enable students to develop as independent thinkers and to draw their own conclusions. AP opposes censorship. AP is animated by a deep respect for the intellectual freedom of teachers and students alike. If a school bans required topics from their AP courses, the AP program removes the AP designation from that course and its inclusion in the AP course ledger provided to colleges and universities. AP opposes indoctrination. AP students are expected to analyze different perspectives from their own. And just, it goes on and on and on like that, with values that are just steeped in hypocrisy. Like, they claim they really stick it to the man when a topic in one of their courses gets banned. And then they completely kowtow to the far-right criticisms of critical race theory by completely watering down the entire AP African American Studies course and not giving students the full gamut of perspectives for them to actually genuinely choose their own beliefs, as the College Board claims that AP is supposed to do. And students not being able to choose their own beliefs is exactly what happens when schools decide to ban their students from engaging with intellectual thought and literature. It's denying the full breadth of critical thought so that they cannot have that banned subject as an option to think about and maybe believe in, which is exactly the point of the bans, but call it what it is, okay? Don't pretend you're giving kids the ability to think for themselves while denying them access to alternative ways of thinking. We all can see that it's bullshit. In Florida, the term intersectionality, as well as topics like the movement for Black lives, Black feminism, and reparations, violates state law, according to Ron DeSantis and the state's Department of Education. And while the College Board claims to not have been swayed by politics in its decisions, those very topics highlighted by Ron DeSantis and the Florida Board of Education have all been conveniently removed from the AP African American Studies curriculum. Though again, the College Board claims it isn't bowing to political pressure, but instead they made the changes over a year of feedback from 300 different professors. Like, right, okay, but what were the political motivations of those professors, okay? This country is teeming with white supremacists masquerading as academics. Even in liberal institutions like Vassar, where I went for undergrad, those aren't immune either. I remember hearing stories of Black professors being denied tenure, being spoken over, being mistreated, and eventually leaving the college. And Vassar College was proudly dubbed by the Westboro Baptist Church as an Ivy League whorehouse. And we printed t-shirts and wore them proudly that said Ivy League whorehouse. And even an Ivy League whorehouse is filled with covert and overt anti-Blackness. That the topics removed from the curriculum line up well with political objections from Ron DeSantis is not pure coincidence, because he is not an original thinker. He's just touting what he knows that bigots around the country want to hear because he wants them to elect him president in 2024. All right, that's my rant, but here's what's actually been cut from the curriculum, okay? The class is divided into 4 units: origins of the African diaspora, freedom, enslavement, and resistance, the practice of freedom, and movements and debates. Under the course goals section in the framework, the words intersection and systemic marginalization were taken out. The topic covering a reading by Henry Louis Gates called 40 Million Ways to be Black was also removed, while at the same time, the College Board gives special thanks to Henry Louis Gates in the acknowledgements of the framework for the class. He's a historian from Harvard, so they definitely just want to lick Harvard's boots, but also not actually honor the work of this scholar, which honestly makes very little sense to me. Like, his thesis, as far as I could tell, is that there are 40 million black people in America, so there are 40 million ways to be black. His whole criticism being that there are many ideologies, from Black Panthers to Malcolm X to socialism and beyond, that expound upon what it means to be black. And there are people, especially in the intellectual circles, especially in the late 60s when he was in college, for example, who believed and continue to believe that if you don't have an afro, you're not black. If you have white friends, you're not black, and so on and so forth. So he's criticizing these various ideologies and talking about the individuality of black people, and I'm truly not really sure what's so threatening about that, unless you're an overt racist who's terrified by being confronted with the individuality of black identity, I guess. But really, it's Unit 4 on movements and debates that was the one that was the most changed. For example, the course topics Freedom is Not Enough, the Early Black Freedom Movement, and Contemporary Debates and New Directions in African American Studies are no longer listed. And Black Feminism, Womanism, and Intersectionality has been changed and is now titled Black Women's Voices in Society and Leadership, which is like the most watered down version you could have come up with. Also removed from Unit 4 are lessons titled The Black Feminist Movement and Womanism, The Social Construction of Race, and Intersectionalism. Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Case for Reparations and Michelle Alexander, who's the author of The New Jim Crow, were removed as reading materials. Intersectionality and others of these topics that were removed are now basically a footnote as an optional project topic at the end of the course. So I wanted to just take some of these concepts and go over them, since the College Board seems to be too scared to do that. Now listen, this AP class is supposed to be college level for a reason, so I'm not pretending that I could teach you everything that you need to know or everything that's been removed from the curriculum, nor am I an authority on this subject matter. I'm just a little white girl with a platform trying to do some good. But let's just go over some basics, okay? I've linked a ton more resources from people with much more knowledge than me down in the description below, and those are resources that the College Board does not want you to read, okay? They're not affiliate links, okay? They're to a local bookstore here in Minneapolis. I'm not a total creep, all right? The College Board doesn't want you or your children to read the things below, so I highly encourage you to check them out. Anyway, let's cover the basics of some of the topics that the College Board won't teach you, starting with critical race theory. Yes, this is an actual thing, not just a scary phrase that Republicans have come up with on their own, though they have co-opted it and mischaracterized it, so it's turned into something different than what it originally was. According to far-right extremists, which I consider to be really anyone on the right side of our political spectrum in the US, because our entire political existence is so far right of any other similarly situated country to us. But according to them, CRT, critical race theory, that's what we're calling it, CRT, is a divisive discourse that pits people of color against white people, okay? Like, no, my dude, all right, your fucking racism pits people against each other. If you think that criticizing the racial bias in our laws and society pits black people against you, then I think you might be the problem, because you seem to be personally identifying with racist laws. Interesting. Okay, so what's the actual definition of critical race theory? According to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, critical race theory, or CRT, is an academic and legal framework that denotes that systemic racism is part of American society, from education and housing to employment and healthcare. Critical race theory recognizes that racism is more than the result of individual bias and prejudice. It is embedded in laws, policies, and institutions that uphold and reproduce racial inequalities. According to CRT, societal societal issues like Black Americans' higher mortality rate, outsized exposure to police violence, the school-to-prison pipeline, denial of affordable housing, and the rates of the death of Black women in childbirth are not unrelated anomalies. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, CRT is an intellectual and social movement and loosely organized framework of legal analysis based on the premise that race is not a natural, biologically grounded feature of physically distinct subgroups of human beings, but a socially constructed or culturally invented category that is used to oppress and exploit people of color. Critical race theorists hold that racism is inherent in the law and legal institutions of the United States insofar as they function to create and maintain social, economic, and political inequalities between whites and non-whites, especially African Americans. Critical race theorists are generally dedicated to applying their understanding of the institutional or structural nature of racism to the concrete, if distant, goal of eliminating all race-based and other unjust hierarchies. So CRT was originally developed in the 70s and 80s by legal scholars after the civil rights movement to help combat the idea that society is or could be colorblind. And it upholds the idea that racism has never been eradicated from our laws or our institutions, but is actually woven into the fabric of our society. And this can be seen in truly all of our institutions, notably in our prison system, where Black Americans are incarcerated at much higher rates than any other racial group. Check out The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, though the College Board doesn't want you to read that one. One really eye-opening resource to see just one way in which racism is still woven into our lives is in the book The Color of Law, which draws a line through housing discrimination immediately after slavery to the racially segregated cities that exist today. And it shows, with receipts, how federal and local laws enforced racism in housing for decades, and the repercussions of that still exist and can still be felt by people of color, especially Black people, to this day. Like, this is not some woo-woo theory like, I don't know, I just feel like racism still exists. I don't know, I'm just really sensitive to that. No, it's an easy to connect series of events in history that restricted Black people from being able to obtain funding for housing or from even finding housing if they had the funds because of exclusionary laws and exclusionary governmental funding, which created segregated neighborhoods, which also pushed projects like major highways to be built in Black neighborhoods, destroying Black wealth and prosperity while doing so, leading to a lack of generational wealth in Black families because property ownership is one of the main means by which wealth is passed in our society. Which means that today, we still see and feel in the racial makeup of our neighborhoods and in the generational wealth people do or do not have, the very real effects of very real overt discriminatory practices enforced by the state. Like, I am losing my mind. Like, this is not made up, okay? You just need the critical thinking skills to connect really basic dots, okay? So critical race theory says that racism is not and has never been eradicated from our laws and our society because racism is the very foundation upon which they have been built. And anyone who's ever studied the law cannot deny that. Or if they can, then they're being willfully ignorant, maliciously ignorant. I could not tell you the number of times I was absolutely floored as I was studying the law in law school. I read case after case and statute after statute written 100 or 150 years ago or less that still exists today or that our laws have been built off of that was founded in overt racism or sexism. It's something that you cannot unsee when you've allowed yourself to actually see it. Like, laws aren't created out of thin air. They are always based on something that came before. And that something, I can almost guarantee you, has a racist origin. For more, you can check out Kimberly Crenshaw's book, Critical Race Theory, although College Board doesn't want you to do that. They don't want you to do that. Speaking of Kimberly Crenshaw, the next subject the College Board doesn't want you or your kids to know about is intersectionality. So Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term critical race theory, and she also coined the term intersectionality. She is like public enemy number one for these people. So intersectionality is a feminist theory at its roots, but what it really boils down to is that you can have multiple identities that can compound the difficulties that you experience as you move throughout the world. You're a woman, so you've been historically marginalized for your sex, but if you're a Black woman, you've been historically marginalized for your sex, and you've been historically marginalized for your race. The two cannot be separated, and they are inextricably linked with your experience of the world, both as a woman and as a Black person, but specifically as a Black woman. And my experience with marginalization as a white queer woman is going to be different than someone's experience with marginalization as a Black woman, or as a white straight woman, or as a Black queer man, etc. Okay? There's a distinct intersection of identities that complicates our understanding of ourselves and the people around us and how society treats them. It's a lens through which to understand people's experiences and to contend with these structural inequalities that affect some people more than others. According to the Florida Department of Education, however, intersectionality is foundational to CRT and ranks people based on their race, wealth, gender, and sexual orientation, which frankly, if you were to actually read academic texts on intersectionality and study how the term has been developed since Kimberly Crenshaw coined it 30 years ago. If you were to do that and still simplify it down to something that ranks people based on their race, wealth, gender, and sexual orientation, I would say you are either willfully and maliciously mischaracterizing it, or your emotional maturity and critical thinking skills are abysmal. So you tell me, which is it? Now, Ron DeSantis, if you can believe it, went to Yale for undergrad and then got a law degree from Harvard. And he's not even a Nepo baby, like his mom was a nurse and his dad installed like cable boxes or something. So that tells me that he's at least literate, okay? Like, we're not dealing with a Leah Michelle situation here. The guy can most likely read. And if we're going just based on college ranking alone, which you shouldn't, but let's do it for the sake of argument, based on college ranking, that also means that he's smarter than I am. So if my little dummy brain can read academic texts about intersectionality and come away with a more nuanced understanding than that it ranks people, something tells me if he really wanted to, he could also wrap his head around it. And yet. But as I said in the beginning, the right thrives on fear-mongering, and which sounds scarier to you? The idea that multiple identities can compound the difficulties that you experience as you move throughout the world, or a theory that ranks people by race, wealth, gender, and sexual orientation? Moving on. Moving on to reparations. The College Board really does not want you to talk about or learn about reparations. They hate that. So after the Civil War, in 1865, General William T. Sherman made a promise for reparations to formerly enslaved people with what became known as 40 acres and a mule, and President Lincoln and Congress approved that promise, which led to the redistribution of 40,000 acres to formerly enslaved people to be able to farm and live and support themselves. Then, Lincoln kicked the bucket, and President Andrew Johnson took over, and he was an old-fashioned Southern Jacksonian Democrat. Yes, a Democrat. Views have shifted over time, but I know present-day Republicans love to say that it was the Democrats who supported slavery, as though present-day Democrats share the same views as Democrats from 150 years ago. Like, study history for 5 seconds. President Johnson was an old-fashioned states' rights guy, so obviously he hated this whole emancipation business, so he rescinded the reparations and took back all the land. Cool. Since then, the idea of reparation, that is the repayment to Black people for the literal torture of being kidnapped, forced to endure the Middle Passage, and then forced to work against their will, and then forced to have children here who had to endure the same fate, whose children had to endure lynching and Jim Crow, and continue to endure the prison industrial complex, violent racism, and death at the hands of police. Yeah, that. The idea of reparations for all of this, it's never died, and it has been espoused by numerous people, including, for example, Confederate veteran Walter R. Vaughn, who believed that reparations would be a stimulus for the South, the Black activist Callie House, Black nationalist leaders like Queen Mother Audley Moore, and many others. I'm gonna read an excerpt from Ta-Nehisi Coates' article in The Atlantic called The Case for Reparations, because he says it a lot better than I can. But be careful, because the College Board doesn't want you to read this. But while the people advocating reparations have changed over time, the response from the country has remained virtually the same. They have been taught to labor, the Chicago Tribune editorialized in 1891. They have been taught Christian civilization and to speak the noble English language instead of some African gibberish. The account is square with the ex-slaves. Not exactly. Having been enslaved for 250 years, Black people were not left to their own devices. They were terrorized. In the Deep South, a second slavery ruled. In the North, legislatures, mayors, civic associations, banks, and citizens all colluded to pin Black people into ghettos, where they were overcrowded, overcharged, and undereducated. Businesses discriminated against them, awarding them the worst jobs and the worst wages. Police brutalized them in the streets. And the notion that Black lives